So a lot of time is spent by people wondering if the church is true, or in other words, if the church is what, it claims to be. However, let's imagine in a Christian context for a moment that there is no such thing as a true church. In other words, the denomination you choose to participate in is essentially just a matter of preference. One might ask, what does Jesus think of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints? Do you see how this is a different question? It's more a question about, is the church good rather than is it true? So if you are a Christian who doesn't believe there is a true church, then really the ultimate question is if the church is good. Is it the church that you believe brings you closer to Jesus Christ? Now, John Dehlin, the founder of the very popular Mormon Stories podcast, recently released a video with his emphatic belief and case that the church not only isn't true, it's not good either. But before we get into some of his distortions, I think one of the first things that John misses is that as members of the Church of Christ, our primary concern is with following Jesus Christ. Remember, John is not a Christian, and that is his fundamental problem. He thinks that he's railing against Mormonism when he really is arguing against ideas rooted in the Bible and Christianity more generally. He sadly shows his myopic Utah Mormon experience by this lack of awareness of Christian thought more broadly, and as he goes along attributing ideas to Mormonism. This is one of his common themes. For example, the notion of a true church comes from the notions of special authority being given to special servants, and that actually comes from the Bible. It's the Bible that shows Jesus speaking to his apostle Peter saying, "Thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and I will give unto you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatsoever thou shalt bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatsoever thou shalt loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven." What is a Christian to do with this? Well, it's precisely the oldest traditions in Christendom, namely the Catholic and Orthodox, for example, that are solidly built on the notion of there being a true church with saving ordinances. After all, it was Jesus in the Bible who said that baptism was needed to enter his kingdom. And it's not very hard to connect the notion of authority with the person with authority needs to be the one doing the baptizing. John seems to forget that we are Christians, and unlike him, we are committed not to the Jesus of our imaginations, but the Jesus witnessed to and testified of by special witnesses, including those who are in the Bible. Just the fact that he says we need to prove that the church is true demonstrates his lack of sophistication in matters of epistemology and Christian thought. And why does he insist that we use his standard of proof? Well, because he claims that following Jesus Christ, as talked about in the Bible and in general Christian tradition, hurts people, and that Jesus requires too much sacrifice of those who follow him. Really? He makes it sound like the church forces unwilling people down some terrible dark path. Is he totally unaware of the immense good the church does? Is he totally unaware that according to Gallup polling, religious people are happier than non-religious people, and Latter-day Saints are the happiest group of religious people in the world? Is he totally unaware that researchers at places like Penn State and others have found that Latter-day Saints are exceptionally high in pro-social behavior and are model citizens and contributors to the communities where we reside? Is he totally unaware that unlike many religions, it is those of the Latter-day Saints that are the highest educated who also tend to be the most active in their faith? Is he totally unaware that Provo, Utah was voted the happiest city in America? There are a lot of dark and dangerous places in the world, but communities where high numbers of Latter-day Saints reside, like Laie, Hawaii, Gilbert, Arizona, and Orem, Utah, are not those places. In fact, when there are social pathologies in Utah, look at the breakdowns by county. What you'll find is that nearly always you'll see that the problems are worse in the quickly secularizing Salt Lake area rather than Utah County, which retains the highest numbers of active members of the church. No, the saints are not perfect and all is not well in Zion. But when you look at the data and compare us to other groups of people, John's claims about church activity being so bad for people quickly falls apart. But what about those youth that he claims are being scarred for life by the church's opposition to normative sexuality? I'm sitting here wondering, whose norms does he think we should follow? Does he really think that modern sexual norms are better than Christian sexual norms? Does he realize that Mormons did not invent the law of chastity? Again, he seems to forget that the church is not about following the whims of popular society of the moment when it comes to sexual matters. We're trying to follow the teachings of Jesus Christ. He also mentions the great evil of having women put their family before their career. Yeah, we do believe that family comes before career, and that doesn't just go for women either. Is he seriously implying that there is something more important in life than family? He then goes on to exaggerate, claiming that women are told to simply marry fast and have as many babies as possible, when in reality the church manual explicitly states, and I quote, "The decision about how many children to have and when to have them is extremely personal and private. It should be left between the couple and the Lord. The church members should not judge one another in this matter." Also, I will not apologize because my wife and myself, like most human couples in human history, have found that in our family, she is more inclined to take the lead with the kids during the day, while I take the lead on bringing in a family income. This demonization of women, like my wife and my mother, who chose this arrangement, is disgusting. Also, since when is being home with your children instead of putting them in a daycare a Mormon thing? It's not. While the church does encourage women to put the care of children above career, we also have an official world proclamation that states that men and women are equal partners and that roles are flexible based on familial circumstance. He also may want to refer to a recent study about all these oppressed LDS women that actually said, and I quote, "Latter-day Saint women are overall happier about their pregnancies, have roughly one more child per family, breastfeed more often than their peers, and among LDS members, women are better educated, marriages are slightly less likely to end in divorce, and members are less likely to die from heart disease or cancer overall than their peers." Also, while he rants about divorce, he seems to forget that the divorce rate amongst Latter-day Saints is lower than the national average. Further, by being an active temple married member, you cut your chance of divorce in half. Has he ever considered that perhaps the temple standards act as a great way to test compatibility and commitment in matters of worldview and morality, two things that can rip apart marriages? Perhaps beyond the religious significance, the temple standards actually help people find a compatible partner. But no, he doesn't think about that because that would go against his agenda. Also, despite all his whining about the saints who get married young, he seems to forget that studies show conclusively that divorce probabilities actually increase once you get married in your 30s. So for him to pretend that the church drives divorce when the data literally shows the opposite is honestly kind of embarrassing. Now let's talk about his claims that we teach black people that they are cursed and ugly. I mean, really, is he living in 1872? Has he read anything from the church on race in the past 20 years? Does he realize that we've completely disavowed all of those teachings from the past that were actually racist? It's nonsense. And then, of course, he lies about gay people. He says that the church teaches that being gay in and of itself is evil. We don't teach that. We, like nearly every other major Christian denomination, simply teach that sex is only to exist within a male-female marriage. Because, well, that's what Jesus taught. That's what the Bible taught. He also seems to think that there's no way Jesus could have expected celibacy. Yet, we find in the Bible Jesus saying this, and I quote, "For there are eunuchs who were born that way, and there are eunuchs who have been made eunuchs by others, and there are those who choose to live like eunuchs," in other words, chaste lives, "for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. The one who can accept this should accept it." So yeah, Jesus expected those who could accept to live a celibate life for the sake of the kingdom of heaven to do so. Again, it seems like John's beef isn't really with the church, it's with Jesus. Also, he rails against those who choose to enter a mixed orientation marriage. Now, it should be noted, this is something that the church explicitly has not encouraged. This may not be the best choice for everyone, so the church wisely leaves it up to the individuals to decide. But seriously, to tell my friend Timber that getting married and having his beautiful children was a mistake is disgusting. The irony of him tacitly shaming my friend Timber for his lifestyle as if it's not authentic because he chose to marry and have children is appalling. Timber's choice may not be the right choice for most gay people, but when Timber holds his babies in his arms, maybe I should look at him and remind him of how bad his decision was to get married. Because, after all, it could end in a divorce, and that never happens to straight couples. Give me a break. He then goes on to lie about suicides among gay members of the church. Or perhaps he is just unaware that Utah's lead researcher on this subject, also a former member of the church who is gay, that he stated that while people might think that the church's teachings are driving suicide amongst gays, there is no data to support that, period. And that's a quote. Or, and I quote, the data show that the more religious you are on average, the fewer mental health problems you have and the lower your chances of suicide. John says it's fundamentally immoral to lead people into the church under false pretenses. Yeah, but that's just a fancy way of saying you shouldn't lie to people. But the reality is that many people in the church may not be sure if the church is true, but they are sure that the church is good. And there is nothing wrong with those people inviting others to come and see for themselves and to make up their own minds as to the value the church can have in their life. The reality is that John is not a serious critic, but he is a popular one. And this is because he's charismatic. He knows exactly what to say to your disaffected member of the church. He hides his deep-seated resentments behind opening prayers and primary songs that open his speeches. But don't let this facade blind you. His passion is fueled by resentment, not an objective analysis of the facts and data. He is a propagandist. You see, most people in the world, unlike John Dehlin, see the church as something good, but they just don't believe in it. And that's perfectly reasonable. What is not reasonable is to see the church as some force that is so bad in the world that it must consume your life's work. Really? With all the problems in the world, with all the injustice, you, John Dehlin, are focusing your attacks on the religion that, according to data, seems to make people the happiest, and whose biggest affront to the world is a Relief Society president dropping by unannounced with a casserole and an invite to the next activity. That sort of strange obsession can only be driven by something pathological. It does not take much imagination to see that what is driving John is a deep sense of hurt from the loss of his own faith. It's what drives many people in his circumstances. If John and his followers could embrace the Christian value of real forgiveness, which is to let go of that resentment, he would not only go on to find greater peace in his life, he could become a believable critic, or perhaps someone who finds better outlets for his need to fight injustice. Hey, if you enjoyed this video, give it a like and hit the subscribe button. Thanks for watching.